It's with great pleasure for me to introduce Coach Robert Dos Remedios. He's been involved in strength conditioning for almost 25 years. After completing his competitive football career at the University of California, Berkeley in 1988, he began training athletes on a full-time basis. Coach Dos has a master's degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in biomechanics from California State University, Northridge. He is certified with both the CSCCA and the NSCA and is a master strength conditioning coach. Coach Dos serves as Director of Speed Strength and Conditioning at the College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, California, a position he has held since 1999. Coach Dos was also named the 2006 recipient of the NSCA's prestigious Collegiate Strength and Conditioning Professional of the Year Award. In addition to contributing to Men's Health magazine on a regular basis, Coach Dos has written 2 worldwide best-selling books, Men's Health Power Training and Cardio Strength Training. Coach Dos.
Thanks, Troy.
You bet.
Hey guys, everybody hear me? We're good? All right. Last talk of the day. Tough slot to be in. All right, so some of you guys have probably seen quite a bit of this stuff that we've been doing over the years. We actually, Jim Liston and I, came up with some of these concepts and some of the drills that you're going to see. We actually presented back, I want to say, it was probably around 2004, 2005, maybe even earlier at the NSCA National in Indianapolis. And from there, we've just been kind of evolving. And the thing that's really evolved more so with this concept of this chaotic, unpredictable type drills that are really deceleration based is kind of the lead up drills and kind of the strength training that we couple with it to get us ready for it. And we've just found that certain things really add to the performance that we get when we start to do these open type drills, okay? So first I want to thank everybody for being here. First of all, I want to thank Chuck and the whole team, Chuck and Becky and the team. I can't say enough about this organization that I've been a part of for a few years now. You know, I'm sure every one of you's probably met Chuck at some point. Chuck will call you and he will talk your ear off. Sincerely cares about every single person in this organization. So if you have a chance to shake his hand, we've come such a long way with this organization. It's a wonderful thing. Chris Pori and Perform Better, they're in the exhibit area. They're my guys over there. They help us out quite a bit with a zero budget in my deal. So we got to try to make you know, some special things happen with no money. There's so many influences, so many that are here this weekend. My strength coach from college, Robin Pound, is here this weekend. Kind of was a person who motivated me to get into this field a long time ago. So we're going to be in a 30-year anniversary soon from graduating college. That's pretty scary. And then all of you guys, obviously, for being here, trying to get better. And then I'd like to go home bright and early tomorrow to my wife, my daughter. Now, you know, Coach Manny came up and talked about a lot of the things, and we've heard this numerous times during this week already about this art of coaching. And this is just something that came from a blog post from Mike Boyle, who's one of my mentors as well. And he talked about, you know, a good coach being able to do a lot with a mediocre program. But if somebody doesn't have that ability to convey the message, you could have the best program in the world, you're not going to have very effective outcomes. So he talks about having, you know, being able to motivate, being able to make people accountable, and being able to make that program work regardless of what your philosophy is, if it's a strength training program, if it's speed, whatever it is. We really have to try to dial that in. So the art of coaching is something that you're just going to get better and better at. Like, I'm so much better now at conveying, cueing, leading a drill, and just being more efficient at it than I was 5 years ago, than a year ago. Okay, don't even go back to articles that I wrote for the NSCA Journal in the early 90s, in the late 80s, early 90s. Okay, I mean, it's embarrassing stuff, so don't even Google that stuff. One of the things that I always hear about, and Coach Manny talked about it just now in his talk, is what's your role as a coach, right? Like, I'm at a little junior college in Southern California talking to you guys. That's amazing, right? I mean, we have people coming and visiting. We have NFL coaches. We've got, you know, NHL coaches. We've got all these people coming and visiting our little dungeon to see what we're doing. So we feel pretty good about that. But I always felt like the reason why we have success at our place is we take this task at hand that we're going to elevate everybody that comes into our presence, okay? And I can't emphasize that enough. I just got a chance to present in Boston a month or two ago, at Perform Better, and Martin Rooney and Mike Boyle, myself, and Nick Winkleman was there. And I just pulled these out, and I could have done the same thing with 3 or 4 tidbits that I got from Coach Manning in the talk just now. But the one that really gets me is the Martin Rooney one. Become the coach you always dreamed of having. And I can't emphasize that enough, guys. I mean, the one thing I can give you today is kind of the 25 years of wisdom stuff. I had a coach my first year playing football in high school. He was a terrible coach. He was a terrible person, and he still coaches to this day. He tried to ride me out of, what I wanted to do, and had I broken, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. Construction, real estate, I don't know. I would not be doing this. But because I got better coaches after that and stuck with it, I can't tell you how important that is, that you be that person, right? You got that power. We're so powerful what we do, the simple things. And another thing that Martin Rooney had said that day that really, really stuck with me was, just basically 4 simple words, right? It's simple words, and sometimes it's hard to say. We just don't say it enough. But I'm proud of you, right? We all grind all day. We demand. But rarely are we doing that, okay? So if there's anything you're going to get today, just go back, and some of those kids that bust their humps, go tell them that. And then we'll start talking about some training things down the line here, and understanding that cool and good are not necessarily going to be the same thing. So about 5 years ago, pretty much did this shell of a presentation at CSCCA, and with some of the new concepts that we have. So this is kind of what we got going. What is chaos? We're going to talk about the research, the foundations, progressions, especially the strength building stuff, and then how to integrate it. So Jim Liss and I came up, and it's always cool to have cool acronyms, but we kind of went with this whole thing with kind of setting up closed drills, being conscious to subconscious, kind of flowing, lots of unpredictability, active to reactive. Open drills are going to live and die on open drills, and then obviously slow, less demanding patterns before we start to move really quickly. So just so we all know, I'm sure you guys are all aware, you've got traditional agility drills are pre-programmed, 3-cone drill, pro agility drill, any kind of set up cone pattern. I'll show you some that we can really master it, right? That's why we have combine prep and things like that. We're going to beat the test. Really, really not very realistic. So the trainability doesn't really account for our ability to have to stop when we don't know we're going to have to stop, which is where every injury is going to happen essentially, right? So we're not going to promote provide that stimulus. So the stuff we're going to talk about today is all going to be driving this stimulus all the time. So when we non-program, right, we're going to have to adapt to unforeseen things. It's real simple. You want to see, chaos, get 9, 7-year-olds on your lawn and turn the hose on them, right? Turn on the sprinklers and watch what happens. Just kind of this crazy chaos. You could be very specific to your sport demands. You're going to see that with some of our volleyball players, some of our basketball players, football players. And then when you look at drills, especially football, and you look at pregame, everything is open, right? You got ball drills, you got reacting, turning the hips, opening, reacting to a ball. There's all these things that are happening that we should be training like that, right? I mean, if coaches think that's the best way to get the guys ready to play, we should probably be doing that on a regular basis. And then we can really develop this. So we can really create and get better at our reactivity, our ability to anticipate. So if we're looking at this, kind of shot this from, this is like old footage. Joey might actually be in this footage right here. So these are just we call these star drills, right? And we just kind of use them as little warm-up patterns. And we're just going to change the patterns all the time. I'm going to tell them what foot to plan on. If you don't tell a kid what foot to plan on and open like a reactive drill, you're always going to get this, right? They're always going to go to their go-to all the time. So we want to make sure they're telling them, sometimes we want to block close with our non-dominant side, or sometimes we want to open or close the hip with the non-dominant. So we're going to make them do that. So on these patterns, all we're doing is changing from shuffling patterns, karaoke patterns, backpedaling patterns, but we're always trying to be real aware that we're going to make them plant, make them react, make them cut, but not have them do the same thing over and over, the same foot, the same hip, okay? Because you're going to blow out that other one. So the whole premise of chaos, we're going to use open drills, right? Now that was a pretty chaotic kind of a closed drill, but it was a closed drill. Everybody knew what they were doing, everything, it was a closed pattern. When we start to talk about this, we're going to try to get close to those actual our sports speed demands, whether it's a pattern like crossovers or backpedaling into a break. We want to make sure we get this, and we're going to make sure we're going to try to break these trainability patterns. So I'm going to put a few slides up, and I'm just being funny with the hashtag there, because I see this all the time, like in Facebook posts and stuff, this whole evidence-based stuff, and I get it. I was in grad school. We have published research. I get it. But practitioners, everybody in this room, you guys drive the research. If it's not for you guys coaching, trying new things, coming up with new drills, coming up with new undulating periodization schemes, there's nothing for the researchers to research, okay? So I'm just kind of being funny here, because most of the time I see that evidence-based thing, and it's usually some blogger who's never spent a day in the dungeon. You guys all read that? Kind of focus on the red. So here's one, just kind of like, we're going to just look at some research, kind of relatively new research. And basically, if we're looking at the bottom there, technique and change, like how technique will change when we load in various sidestep cutting deals. Although I may place an athlete at higher risk of injury because their knee loads have been shown to increase the strain in the ACL, training athletes to avoid such body positions results in a reduced risk of non-contact ACL injuries. So now we're going to see that a lot of the strength stuff we're going to talk about with the deceleration and a lot of the drills are really, really going to be positive in preventing injuries. Anticipatory effects on knee joint loading during running and cutting maneuvers. Cutting maneuvers performed without adequate planning may increase the risk of non-contact knee ligament injury, right? It's kind of like, we get it, right? We understand that, but what are we doing in our training to address that? Gender differences, this is big, right? Gender differences in knee and ankle kinematics and frontal plane. We're going to talk about the frontal plane over and over again. Like the misunderstood, like stepchild of movement planes, okay? You better be training that frontal plane quite a bit. Implementation of dynamic neuromuscular training with young athletes focusing on frontal plane motion may help prevent ACL injuries. Effective gender and defensive opponent on sidestep cutting, right? A simulated defensive player causes increased lower limb movements and forces. Should be useful in addition to lab protocols for sidestepping. Now we start to see that whole concept of rabbit drills, one-on-one V1s, things like that. Gender on lower extremity segment joint coordination during unanticipated cutting maneuvers. Gender differences and variability of lower extremity coordination may underlie the increased incidence of certain lower extremity injuries in females. We know there's differences. Okay, we better start to address that, especially when we have patterns and we see people move like tall, long femurs, things like that. We've seen great Q angles. We better start to address that in the great women when we're doing our running around outside. This one's great because this is relatively about a year, right? The importance of sport-specific stimulus for training agility, basically telling us that something with a rabbit, small-sided games, reaction stuff is going to be the way to go, okay? Maybe. Acceleration is great. We could work it. We could work starts. We could work mechanics. We do about 2% of our speed work is probably linear. 98% of it is going to be chaotic. We just don't have the time to do that. I honestly don't. I don't do it. Some of you guys may spend a lot more time on it. We just don't work all those sprint mechanics. If the kid's running track for us, he's getting all that anyway with his coach. He's going to be doing that with his coaches. But for us, we don't do anything, and our 40s always get faster. Right? We address other situations with that. I'm obsessed with brakes. I can't tell you how much I'm obsessed with brakes. I know our sports med team is obsessed with brakes. They've grown to love brakes like I do. Deceleration is going to be kind of the mechanism, right, for all the problems that we're going to have. Decreased yielding time, or that amortization phase, is going to be huge in making a play, right? That that tenth of a second stuff, the stuff that can I go from deceleration to reacceleration faster. And if I'm training it all the time, I'm going to get much better at it. So we have to address that ability to stop. And the best kind of example I've heard is, you could have the fastest car in the world, but how fast would you drive if you had no brakes, right? So we want to make sure we're addressing that. It's great to be fast, but when you got those reactive jackrabbit athletes, they've got all these great qualities in them already. Now we want to make sure they don't break down. So the key is, can you stop? Great. Can we stop when we don't know you're going to have to stop? So how do we look at the brakes and how do we address the brakes? We look at landings. Real simple stuff. Hop and stops, jump and stick landings, 180 jumps, forward jumps, lateral jumps, over a barrier jumps, sticking the landing. Over the years, I've gotten away from the concept that we want to do tons of these like reactive plyometric stepping off the box stuff. I'm going to load, we'll put weighted vests on, we'll get in the sand, we'll work landings and power generating from those positions. We're not too keen anymore on, we've had our issues with boxes, in the past, so we try not to leave any more DNA on our boxes in there. So we can add boxes. If you do, hopefully you have the soft ones. Weighted vests, a load. I'm going to show you some stuff with the bands. It's very, very simple to do. Just going to let this play. So basically, kind of like a lot of times we do these landings post-workout, so get a little bit of a fatigue state. So we're just going to run through and just kind of go through all the systematic kind of patterns for the deceleration for some of our volleyball girls. Kind of older footage here. So everything's going to change, right? So if we go from even simply getting out of this bilateral, real comfortable thing and having somebody work on split jumps, it's a totally different pattern. So you need to do that, or now get to the frontal plane and work ice skater jumps, or do 180s and land on the other foot, things like that. We want to keep changing up and keep changing the demands, and we can get real good at them real quick. You just got to be real good about working them, okay? And then obviously doing the strength work and everything, so that we're getting stronger and stronger as a unit. So the patterns keep them simple. We can load the patterns. We can keep it unloaded like this. So I'm going to skip ahead, kind of look at how we would contrast. So we've got resistance and assistance, right? Which is great in both directions, but I'm focusing there, right? So he's going to be working harder to pull against that bungee, but he's going to be over speed to come back. So we want him to really, really stick that on that frontal plane, okay? I can't emphasize that. You're going to keep seeing this over and over again with us in the frontal plane, even with our sled work and stuff. There's been 14 Division I running backs that have rushed for 2,000 yards, and that's one of them right there. Pretty proud of them. Okay, so now we start to add in the bands, right, super bands. And a lot of these drills I got from a guy named Dave Schmitz. Some of you guys from the Midwest might know Dave Schmitz, the rubber band man. Brilliant, brilliant stuff that he comes up with. Real simple stuff. So this one is just what we call like a broad jump with our pumping the brakes. So broad jumps and then working on being controlled and braking in that really, really awkward backwards thing. Jumping backwards, moving backwards is not really that comfortable for most people. Ice skaters, once again, we got a resistance assistance, but I'm focusing on, can he stick that against a load, external load, on the way back? And can we get the anchor man to support him? So we want to freeze that a little bit longer at the home. Most of the time we're doing this, like I said, post-workout, but we can do standalone workouts where we would just be focusing on all these drills in addition to all the chaotic stuff that you'll see in a minute. So frontal plane, working forward, backwards. When we start to talk about progressions, we gotta make sure you're really, really dialing in your strength training. And that means not just bilateral stuff, right? It means single limb stuff, lunging patterns, frontal plane patterns, multiple plane, drop, curtsy lunges, things like that. Make sure that we're addressing everything, and we're loading. We're loading those like we would load and periodize all of our other strength movements. Getting them in the splits is great because they don't feel very comfortable. We want to get them in that split as much as we can. Whether it's just catching it, doing a hang clean with a split catch, or split jerks, or it's just split jumps. And then we progress to start to add in external load with those bands, with the weighted vests. And then instead of talking about all the weight room stuff, kind of focusing on some of the other things you see in the back of the pictures there. With the sleds, I can't emphasize the sleds are really, really going to be beneficial because it's going to allow us to load. Let me see if this next one might be better. Hang on. So, Frankenstein walks, some of our golfers. And I always say this, and people think I'm kidding. This is the only time the halls ever get cleaned in my building when we put the carpets on. So Frankenstein walks, and then if we have, a lot of times for transition purposes, we put the TRX on there. If not, I've got some of my injured crew here, going to go loaded because that's how we're going to end up loading that lower body. You'll see just these are basic, sagittal patterns, but you'll see we'll start to move into frontal and then even multiple plane movements. So now we start to move to that frontal plane. Pretty heavy loads here. We can lighten it and go a little faster. We're going to work in that karaoke walk. So now we're going to start to rotate around transverse a little bit more. And we're also going to, much more like a push-pull instead of a push-push-push with a side step or a shuffle. Duck walks, we're going to really get that great hinging. It's like a walking RDL. So all these types of things that we might be addressing, via, bilateral, unilateral, knee-dominant patterns, hip-dominant patterns, we can get a lot of work with the sleds and a lot of loading, and it's going to be a little bit different, obviously. We can add bands. Obviously, we do ladder patterns now. It's going to be loaded, resisted against stairs, resisted against with bands and stairs, jumps, hops, lateral patterns, karaoke patterns, anything that we would probably do in a ladder. Hops, jumps, lateral hops. Just kind of working against, we know we have the resistance there, so we're going to be careful to not yank them down the stairs. Okay, so we start to address the strength aspect and the kind of the readying, and we're constantly obviously doing all this at the same time. But once we start to feel pretty confident about, us moving on, we start to talk about teaching, like basic cutting patterns and things like that. Like, you ever see somebody will do a cone drill and they'll run to touch that line, and they'll slip and fall, right? You guys have all seen that, right? Somebody will just go to touch the line, they'll slip and fall on the ground. 10 times out of 10, 9.999 times out of 10, because they cut with their inside, they plant on their inside foot. So we're not loading, we're not just kind of keeping basic mechanics in mind with a base of support, keeping my center of mass within my base support, stuff like that. So you want to teach them all that stuff first, and that's the whole conscious and subconscious. So we want to drill that, walk before you can run, and then start to progress into can we do that with a coach-led verbal visual cue, right? That Coach Mann even talked about, working those drills, and it started to make it more chaotic. So you want to start to, work those patterns, get them down, get them sound, drop your center of gravity down, all that good stuff that we know. So when we start to talk about the very first step, it's just like the first one stimulus reaction move, okay? So it's just like, can you react to the starter's gun? Can you react to a visual stimulus or something that you hear or even a physical touch, okay? So we've got tennis ball drills. We've got the different cues. We can make them close their eyes and listen for a clap versus a whistle versus my voice. And then basically what we're trying to work on is this first step, quickness. So we've all done tennis ball drills, but what I like to do is we make them start, right, toes on the line, and we never even teach. Let's see if I can go back. You guys know who Lee Taft is? Anybody heard of Lee Taft? Lee Taft is just brilliant with his agility stuff. If you don't know, if you haven't seen his stuff, make sure you look him up. Now, the one thing that I used to teach all the time was like no false step, right? But it's not a false step. Lee calls it a plyo step or power step, and everybody does it. Everybody's going to do it. So unless you're working a falling start and you just time it just right, in the real world, even when receivers start here, like I watch Sports Science, they had like NFL receivers on there, they still plyo stepped off of that. Like this wasn't even enough to start. They still plyo stepped. So it's like, don't sleep on the plyo step. It's what's going to get them going. You don't have to teach it to them. They're going to do it. The only time you're going to have to address it is if they're taking a giant one, right? Because now they've shifted their weight back. Now it's counterproductive. But if you get their toes on the line, you don't have to tell them which foot. They're going to automatically do it. But we get them started here. Then they see the ball or the sound or whatever, and they go, okay? So if you see athletes do that, don't coach that out of them. I think it's counterproductive to coach them out of them, because now they're gonna lose that. You're gonna lose that spark that they're gonna need. It's all gonna come from that plyo step. So first thing is, let's not call it a false step. You'll see it. I'll let you see it. Every time you'll see it. Then we'll change positions, right? Get them to react from their bellies, get them to react from their back. Give them a chance for some success and really work on the whole thing. Hey, you're going to react, now let's cover ground. Let's cover ground. Now we just add stacked on to the demands of having to roll over, having to get up out of that, and then now track the ball because you're going to lose it for a split second. Now, another one is just really simple is this reverse pivot. Once again, talking about multiple planes and the demands and the braking, and there's two choices, right? They don't know which side it's going to be. I could be saying something, I could be pointing, and we're just going to work on reverse pivot off that backside shoulder, and then break it that 90 degrees, and then, like I always say, the cue is imaginary wall, and they don't want to float through. They want to plant, like screw themselves into the ground, unscrew themselves out, and go. It's a really, really great drill, really easy to teach. So you saw some of the reverse pivot stuff. Then we'll start to see like just coach-led, visual, verbal stuff, whistles. This is just a 45-degree angle cut. So they break to whichever flag, there's a flag on each side. You see the plant. You don't have to tell them which foot to plant on. If they plant with the wrong foot, they're not going to be able to cut. There's the reverse pivot again. Then you'll see we'll go to more of a crossover, so a plant crossover and break. Should be coming next. So having to really, really hunker down and then re-accelerate. But once again, if you look how much, when the hip turns, it's really a frontal plane break almost every single time. That frontal plane is just going to be grinded out. We're going to grind out on that frontal plane all the time because that's pretty much what's going to happen in the real world. And then you're more reactive, you're stronger, more body aware athletes they're going to look a lot better. They're going to take less of those little choppy false steps. They're going to be able to plant and get out. Coach led, this is what I'm talking about when you got to tell them what foot to plant on. And this one we're going to close the hips, which is kind of an unrealistic, but we're going to put them like in a almost a deficit kind of position. So that was squared hips, square back, square forward. Now we're going to open, be a more natural closing and opening of the hip. But I'm telling them, so they're going right foot, close and open. When they come back, they'll go left foot. We're going to balance that out no matter what. We're always going to get equal on both sides. So now visual. And then you also have like a race at the end, because there'll be a whistle or a go, and then it's everybody's racing, through the 20-yard line or whatever our cones are set at. Frontal plane again, right? Just drilling the frontal plane with a shuffle pattern. Some people are faster than other people. So now we're going to go with that karaoke move, which I really, really love. They should be able to go a lot faster with the karaoke pattern versus a shuffle slide. You can go verbal, something, audio. Now, this is that crossover, or the reverse pivot again, but see the coaches are on the sides. So they don't have me in front pointing. At the last second, one coach is going to raise their hands, and that's the direction they're going to have to break to. I would start with smaller groups on that, though, because it ends up kind of a little scary. So once again, working those patterns now, where's the stimulus coming from? So now as we progress even further, we start to talk about like this multi-level deal. So we have stuff that we call them chaos in a box. It can be coach-led, partner-led, where basically we place somebody in a realistic size box with 4 cones, and I could be in the front, and I could say a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, number of the cones, or I could give a direction, back, that's your back right, that's your back left, it's your front right, your front left. And based on that, they're gonna break to that cone, come back to the center, reset. So now we've got all those different movement patterns, but they really get to dial in with what they're seeing or what they're hearing, especially when you start to go to the second level, you start to number cones, it's gonna get pretty tough. So I would start off with the visual. And just get them back to home. And we could set this up with just lots and lots of boxes with one coach leading the whole drill in the center. These are the types of drills that'll be more plyometric, obviously more reactive. These are the things that you want to try to get done when they're not in a fatigue state. Otherwise, it's just going to look sloppy. But see, you've got this crossover of the hip. You've got this plant to a break. All the things that they're going to get. If you just, you didn't look at the drill and you just looked at their feet, they're pretty much playing volleyball. It just kind of looks like, you could throw a blanket over 6 girls in a tent and it's just chaotic stuff going on if you don't see the ball. So real simple things that you can get done, and then they'll get better and better and better at it. Now when you see it, I don't know if it's in this clip or the next slide, once we start to add, remember the research talked about when we start to go like 1v1 stuff, you start to add in the rabbit, it gets a little tougher. This is actually backwards. This is like, we do a mirror one, right? So you go to the same cone, but this is opposites. This will really mess you up. Talk about Ken Manny, talk about train the brain. It's gonna be a lot of processing. So this is something you'll get to down the line because she's going to the opposite. So if she goes front right, you gotta go back left. So it's a lot harder to process. So you'll get real frustrated if we try to throw that in first. So basically we wanna go right off the get-go with mirror, right? They go to their front left, you go to that same cone basically. They go to the back, you go to the same one on that side. But they're actually doing a pretty good job with the opposites right now. And this is all just partner-led. Even those other patterns, or we change the patterns up. So now they go from like diagonal run, back pedal, we throw a ball in there, make it even more chaotic. Even the other ones where the kids were doing the breaks, we could put a rabbit in the middle and have 4 guys or girls on each side, and then they would, whatever they do in the middle, they hit the bellies, they get up, they sprint, they back pedal, they shuffle, karaoke, whatever it is, bear crawl, they're gonna mirror them. So you could do the same patterns, add in, stack up more patterns, and then you're gonna get, obviously, all those different levels of stimulus with a rabbit in the middle. Just partner-led stuff, and we keep the patterns pretty simple. And then this is where you can get real competitive, but you just don't want to mismatch your groups. So don't put like your middle in there with the libero or something. Okay, so once again, saw some of the rabbit drills. We saw the mirror stuff, the basic stuff, the same, and then we just saw the opposites, but the same would be easier. And this is when we start talking about adding different movement patterns into the mix, keeping the drill short, like 10 seconds and under, right? You could turn this into a conditioning drill, but it's gonna understand, just know what you're doing it for. You wanna be reactive, you start going over 8, 9, 10 seconds, you're going to start to really lose it, especially if the intensity is super high. If the athletes are paired up, you're going to get great benefits out of this if they're paired up correctly. There's actually 2 chasers on that one right there. So we try to mix it up, especially obviously with our football kids. Get them up off the ground, the whole kind of like the whole mat drill style. Get them rolling around a little bit. Big guys don't generally like to get down there. But 10 seconds, boom, whistle blows. They sprint to the finish. They race, compete to the end, to the finish line, which would be the sideline in this case. Next 2 guys are going. So one of the things, we talk about like, what do we do coaching-wise over the years? You start to figure out ways to get a little more efficient with your time, be able to get larger groups, especially when you're in the real world, large groups, no helpers. You got to figure out a lot of ways to get drills done that are going to be, effective and efficient. Now, I've done this talk I kept this in because this is important. But, we're talking about athletic populations, but even if you're working with general population, this kind of stuff's going to be beneficial no matter what, because we're talking about strength and multiple planes and deceleration and brakes and all that kind of good stuff. It's going to add a great variety for a lot of conditioning. Look, we will throw in this stuff for conditioning. So if I took that first drill, that box drill, and we made it a 10-yard box, they're going to cover like 160 yards if they go in and out of the box and around the perimeter. So that's a long way to cover. That's a long time. They're in that drill for like 20, 25 seconds. So you can now dial in your energy system stuff, and we can actually get kind of like a 2-for-1 on that, right? Let me go on here. Look at the third bullet. We want to keep, when we start doing rapid reactive stuff, keep the intervals, right? The work to rest got to be a bigger ratio. So make sure we're getting adequate rest to come back, otherwise it's going to get nasty. 5 seconds can be a really hard competitive rabbit one-on-one drill. You start to go over 10 seconds, it starts to get a little sloppy, a little tougher, especially with your bigger athletes. So you want to look at the work ratios, like 1 to 5, right? If it's longer, at least 2 to 1 on that with the rest. But make sure you're keeping the quality high, especially if it's something that's going to have a 4 or 5 different movement patterns. We're going to have to think, because once that goes, it's over, right? The brain's just stop working. So when you start implementing this stuff, and most of you guys have great athletes compared to my knuckleheads, you're going to have probably be able to jump ahead really quick in all these progressions. But remember, there is a progression. There is a kind of a science to this progression, right? We want to make sure that we're creating success from the get-go with a closed pattern, teaching them how to move, and then moving from there, okay? Walk before you run, essentially. We throw these in, so if it's a day we're going to work out, we're going to get outside, we're going to do some of this stuff. If it's super reactive, we want to make sure it's not like 2 or 3 different coaches today talked about getting outside, doing stuff on the field, but being realistic, not having a crazy heavy leg day and then going out and trying to be reactive. It's just not going to work, right? Or trying to go out and do reactive plyometrics. It's not going to be very good. You can still get a conditioning effect from it, but we're going to get a decrement there, or it's not going to be as good of a movement pattern. And the best part about this is that you have to anytime I can get a group to compete a little bit, we're going to get more, right? We're going to always get more out of that drill. So if it's the standard cone drill or whatever, unless we're testing and their timing, you're generally going to get more out of it when you've got 2 people competing against each other in that box, or a coach is on them, and then on that second whistle, they're gone. One of the things that we didn't see in the drills was physical. So I could have 2 people, and I could be behind one person, right? So I have the person in front who's essentially the rabbit, and he's leaning back against that partner, and he's working whatever pattern we got. It's usually like a shuffle slide, like a basketball, kind of posting somebody up. Pushing against him, and he's pushing against him, one hand high, one hand low. So now my cue back here is I need to stay in his frame based on what I'm feeling from that person. But the end of the drill is dictated by the person in the back. So I tell them at about 10 seconds, we'll go like go, and maybe 7-8 seconds in the drill, you just say ready. Like at any point in time, they can end the drill. So they can keep it going longer, but once they tap that athlete, whichever side they tap them on, it's going to be a race to whatever sideline is to that direction. Does that make sense? I wish I had it on video. But basically they're fighting, and then, You know, the guy's got the go sign, he's ready to go. So at any point in time, I could tap and go, right? Until now, the rabbit switched places. Does that make sense? But it's a totally different feel when you have a physical cue. Even just standing behind somebody and having them go left or right and not telling them, and then tapping them on the hip to that side changes that whole processing. Okay, so now, especially when you're pushing against somebody, you got a pretty specific kind of movement there, right? Like in the paint or something. And then now he's got a break based on what that rabbit does. You've got like a multi-level chaotic deal there with that physical cue, okay? So physical cue could be just a real simple, you're going on my movement, on my tap, you go to the direction of the side of the tap, or you can go to that next level with the actual partners, push it up against them. One of the things I couldn't get it to play on earlier was basically we could set this up in your headphones, right? So athletes can train on their own and get audio cues on an iPod, on a track, on a random track. So I have a track, they could put on a playlist or whatever they want to do, and they could just start going, and the tracks will be 10 seconds. There'll be another set of tracks, will be 15 seconds, maybe a longer conditioning one will be 20 seconds. And on it, they'll just hear a beep or a go or a switch. So they just pick whatever pattern they want to work on. They want to get in the sand pit and they want to do it. They put their headphones on and they go. And every time they're going to pick a pattern, maybe it's karaoke. They hear beep, they change the direction on that. And it's completely random. And the stack of files that I had that were made for me, they're completely random. So I have like 10-second ones and I have like 30 of them. So they're completely mixed. So if you have a 30-second folder or a 10-second drill folder, you can mix it up and just change your playlist up so it's constantly mixed, and then you're going to have it random no matter what. You'll never be able to figure it out. Does that make sense? So now you've got the ability to do that without somebody else to be there or a coach to lead, but now you can plug it in your iPod and you can go. You guys can find me anywhere, right? So you can find me on Facebook. We're building a new web page at the college, cocathletics.com. We're trying to get into the 20th century there. You can find me on Facebook or Twitter. You can email me. We have people come by all the time. If you guys want to come by and hang out and have fun with us. And then obviously I'm around here if you guys want to hang out, talk a little shop. I love talking training. I love drinking beer. Doing both at the same time is awesome. And then I'll be out later watching the Ducks and the Kings. Guys, I'll tell you right now, like I said, my place is open for anybody that ever wants to come by. We're in a great spot down there near LA in Southern California. I can't say enough, how I'm just humbled basically to be here with you guys and talking to so many great people this whole week. It's been awesome. So I want to thank you guys for coming, and I'll be around, okay?